Uh, so why unemployment is a hoax? Um, this is this is really an attempt to examine why we are so enthralled with with the issue of unemployment, especially for our youth, and yet we've got so much opportunity to redefine all this for ourselves, not like this, so that we are not stuck in a colonial mode of understanding what unemployment is. If you go into the economic textbooks that we use at university and create all these graduates who flood the market, unemployment refers to individuals who are unemployable and seeking a job, but are not able to find one. That's, and included in this group, if you for really industrialized countries where 95 to 98% of the population is urban, and industrial, this group includes the workforce who are working but actually do not have the appropriate job. So if you were trained as an engineer and you are working in a hotel, then you are unemployed. So of course, for uh, all economies, it is an important indicator of the country's economic status, depending on how it is defined and how it is measured. Now, I was looking for the equivalent term for unemployment in my own mother tongue, and I could not find one. That's why I thought this cannot be an African concept. The closest I could get in my own mother tongue was laziness. There was nothing I could find except to say, you're just lazy. Okay. So if we translate today's massive unemployment, so-called, on the continent in a slightly modified but importantly different conceptual understanding, we would then say there's two forms of unemployment today in Africa when we start pushing African conceptualization of this issue. There's structural unemployment. And structural unemployment happens when the skill sets of workers do not match society's circumstances or opportunities, you see. And in our case, it's because employment refers to industrial and service sectors. Otherwise, it's not employment. In societies where industrial and service sectors are less than 10% of society. So that's structural unemployment, because it doesn't matter. You can change governments every day. You can change economic policies every day. If you are not focused on understanding at what stage of structural transformation your economy is, it won't change the rate of unemployment. In fact, it doesn't matter whether it's South Africa or Nigeria or Kenya, Zimbabwe, the equilibrium rate of unemployment will continue to go up because people, the skill sets are not matching. The workforce that we are producing is not matching the actual circumstances of society. Then there's voluntary unemployment, which is where most of us are. And voluntary unemployment happens when workers decide to leave or ignore the actual work opportunities in the community that mesh not only our resources, but our stage of development and what it takes to stay in full employment. So I would say a lot of our so-called unemployed in Africa is actually voluntary unemployment. So there is limited economic convergence in the entire economy, whether it's between rural and urban areas, between the primary raw material producing sector and the manufacturing sector, between the wealthy parts of our society and the not so wealthy parts. And without converging those, meaning developing strong links between the two based on the actual configuration of resources and opportunities, then you don't have the classical term of employment. So we need to redefine and understand that the domestic market, which is what usually creates the opportunity for economic activity, what you produce, what you manufacture, what you add value, what you take into the service sector. That domestic market is misunderstood. And therefore, until we also redefine that, we won't be able to define employment correctly. So this is the background to what then I would say, from a purely African conceptualization of the issue, we are still at a stage where I would say what we should be looking for, and we are not at the moment, is the community and stakeholder capitalism. And here are some of the key ingredients for us to generate new wealth through community and stakeholder capitalism. One, we cannot, and I repeat, we cannot develop economic assets before we develop strong, massive social assets. Now, the way we are educated and the way we educate subsequent generations, we separate the two. There's something that we tell subsequent generations, that you can actually develop a community or a province or an entire economy. We can develop economically before we have strong social assets. It won't happen. And this is how we understood economics before colonization. It started with strong social assets. So what do I mean by strong social assets? Social assets are creating institutions, rules and regulations of how society functions, so that as society changes, transforms, as more wealth is created, there's stability. So without strong social assets, people governing themselves at village level, being able to resolve all manner of issues, whether it's domestic violence, whether it's petty theft, whether it's just not being able for people to guarantee agreements that they have between themselves. Those are the social assets that create the scope for economic assets. And if you look at what has happened in Africa today, we have literally killed all the social assets. There's no more functional assets at community level. If you go to most of our communal areas, they are becoming more and more ungovernable. And in my youth, you would hardly have any thefts or murder in the village. Today, people steal anything from soap that's left outside to goats and chicken. So that is happening at a time when the economy is not a stage where you have policemen in every village, you have all the trappings and structures of a highly industrialized society. So when society, social assets crash like they have done for us before, state assets can come in to replace them, we will never be able to build economic assets. How do you build wealth in situations where self-governance on land issues, on domestic issues, etc., on natural resource issues, how you manage your grazing area, how you manage your trees and forests, and so on. If those structures have collapsed at a social level, then the African understanding of how you build a wealthy, powerful society is gone. So that's first thing. Second thing is we have land. And it doesn't matter how much land one has or a family has, it's always a good starting point. And like I've discussed this issue before, and I won't spend time on it now because I've spent a lot of time on it before, but just being able to say, right, this is the homestead area, and then the rest is where we start in an African conceptualization of economics. Because once you define your homestead area, where your family resides, where you are able to generate most of the good living, that is where you put most of your effort in developing that asset. And then you can go to the additional land assets that you may have in additional arable and grazing area, and then the community owned areas. So it's very important for us to redefine homestead development in the whole way that we are rebuilding African society. If people don't start by rebuilding lovely, homely homestead areas, then hoping that you're going to build those somehow in urban areas or wherever next you're going to make a killing, we're also losing it. So we go in our rural areas, there's not enough. Some are trying, but it should be part of our lifestyle and culture that your homestead area is the most beautiful and the most homely place ever to start with. You don't need lots of cash to do that, as we will discuss later. The third is what was understood in African social and economic philosophy, that everything ultimately revolves around asset-based community ownership, asset-based resources that the community manages so that families and individuals can enjoy. So the asset-based community development philosophy is something I noticed throughout Africa that used to be powerful and now has collapsed, because those community-based assets, you didn't need cash. You see, you actually, cash is a distortion of wealth in Africa. What was needed and what used to be available was not only the land-based resources being looked after, but that would be the initial basis to create and add value, whether it was the timber for building, construction, for creating all sorts of technological solutions to mechanize our farming, whether it was our water sources, our mountains, our wildlife. All those were huge assets which we just needed to strengthen and modernize that, so that we would work in our community and communal and rural areas today and find that communities can point to community assets. Today, the concept of community assets is dead. You find in the forest areas, anyone can now go and hunt without any rules. Anyone can go and build their own house without any real rules anymore. Very few places you find that the community can say, that's our community assets. And here's, through mutual respect and mutual benefit and mutual responsibility, set the rules and values to manage those. So all this, if it was there, it makes it then possible to have what all other traditional communities who have transformed, like Japan, China, in Asia, and some parts of Africa are beginning to go back to these community-based kind of stakeholder spiderweb capitalism, where we now exchange goods and services within the village. You don't wait to take your stuff to town. Within the village, we start enjoying a higher level of lifestyle, because now we're able to exchange goods and services at community level. Like I say, cash is distorting Africa so badly, because I've reached a point in my old age that where now I am no longer able to think through these concepts I'm talking to you about without first telling myself, I have to take cash out of the equation. What would my village look like? How would it function? How would we have all these fantastic things that upgrade people's lifestyles without cash being exchanged? What would it look like? This is how we have to think as Africans, once again, before we bring cash into our thought. But in terms of recreating a higher society, a higher lifestyle, where goods and services are exchanged right there in the village and township, we really have to take out the cash equation in the thought process, because this is what is destroying everything. People prepared to leave Harare, Johannesburg, Lagos, name it, to Dakar, to just cross the deadly seas, so that you can earn cash. You're not really going for anything else but cash, because the lifestyle is not that. I mean, those places you're rushing to, they're not as lovely as your place. They're not as beautiful. The people are not as nice. You're just going for cash. So this is where I think that if we go back to that, let me call it territorial-based development concepts that create full employment at all times, because there was never unemployment in Africa. It is about, at each stage of social transformation, what is the best configuration of us working flat out without anybody being left out, so that we can continue to provide goods and services for the level of society we are at. So the idea of proto-industrialization is brilliant for Africa, because that is where we are, except that our governments and our donors don't want to believe that. Being able to push raw material production and mass production of those materials and mass processing them in the village and township is really where Africa is. Because Africans, when you look at what we now call informal sector, that's what we're doing, but it's not in government policy, because it's supposed to be informal. Meanwhile, we are not teaching our younger generations from early childhood onwards to university, that is the real Africa. That is the indigenous commerce. That is what makes it possible for somebody to wake up in the morning and say, I'm actually fully employed here where I am, and I can produce stuff and add value to that stuff, as we'll talk a little bit about later. I will go to the food and health, because this to me is the starting point. It always starts with the food sector. If we able to, in the village, in the township, really talk about minimizing importing of all these foods which don't make sense. A lot of what we are importing is actually poisonous stuff. This is stuff that has been packaged and prepared with lots of additives so that they can last long during export to our countries, and then there's longer shelf life. It's poison that we are taking. It's destroying our health. At the same time, we're not building our own food industries, which would guarantee us much more healthy lifestyles. So I would like to suggest that the way we took care of this traditionally is to make it a lifestyle. But if you get up in the morning and eat white bread, which is totally processed and there's nothing in it except that you're addicted to it, and then you keep eating during the day these unhealthy foods, it's just a lifestyle that you are used to. You could easily change that lifestyle by just getting used to healthier foods. But more importantly, we could be more innovative about producing and packaging those foods in a much more convenient way, so that we can outcompete these fast foods which are unhealthy for us. And the one area that is related to the food and health sector, the health sector now is becoming more and more important, because it's an area where a lot of the rural communities can now actually be the pharmacies and producers of healthy herbs and medicines for everything from headaches to suppressing COVID symptoms. Those are areas where we should be doing a lot more research, produce a lot of local products, package them for local consumption and beyond. But the hospitality aspect of African lifestyle is probably the most forgotten one. The Africans have been by far known as the most hospitable people on earth. And being able to really make our rural areas more and more attractive for visitors is something that I think is a huge area that we are missing, because we should be building, when I say hotel, all I mean is the village hotel. I mean, it can be expensive things. You go to Europe and developed countries, you go into a bed and breakfast. What is it? It's just a small little room with a small little bed. As long as you sleep and then you get up in the morning, you get a little bit of breakfast and then you go out. These, if our homesteads, if we spend time making our own homesteads in these rural areas, just look clean. They don't have to be built in European or building using our materials, but clean and habitable. People being able to willingly spend money and time to live with us. We cook for them healthy foods. Hospitality is in future going to be one of the biggest areas for actually expanding the food and health sector. People are going to come to Africa, not only to eat the healthiest food on the planet, but also to have the healthiest living. And instead of popping drugs every day to stay healthy, they will be eating healthy food and healthy herbs. We should take this very, very, very seriously. Next, please. So my final kind of attempt to break down the community and stakeholder capitalism and how it filters into the family and individual. I'm going to leave you with these 5 assets. It doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter what you're doing. These are the 5 assets that we are failing to convert into jobs and employment. First, as always, is the land and the natural resources on it. Then your own labor and the skills you bring with your labor onto your homestead and the natural resource assets, given the local market. Then the third most important in African economics is the connections. It's not the technology or capital, by the way. The connections that you have, social connections, business connections, and networking, and being able to exchange goods and services locally and expanding and going beyond is the single most important skill that we have lost as Africans. Instead of networking and connecting to create wealth and jobs for ourselves, we are busy just going to look for a job somewhere else. Technology, once again, is something that we were booted out of in our terms of our mindset, because instead of using our own thinking processes to advance technologies, a lot of what we've borrowed now is inappropriate in terms of especially use, just overuse of chemicals which are not good for us. But there are some good ones, especially on the mechanical technologies, where once we get a lot of these small machines, not only for raw material for production, but also for processing, we should really reverse engineer a lot of this. That's how the Asians did it. It was people with hardly any college education. You don't need, you just need smart people who are dedicated. We should not be buying every single little machine from the Chinese and Japanese and the Brazilians. No, we should just buy a few and reverse engineer into them and produce them ourselves to fit the situation on our ground, so that in those rural areas, everything from land preparation using small machines, the entire set of machines, from cultivation to weed control to whatever, it's to pre-processing of grain at harvest time, all that can be done using locally prefabricated machines in our communal areas, which of course it has to be part of support from the state. And capital is where we usually get lost. We think money is the biggest thing for us to grow our industries and jobs. It, to me, is the very, very last thing. But if all the above is perfectly taken care of, capital is a natural thing that will come through, and it will always follow good ideas. So in trying to put this into a higher level perspective, I would say we have to redefine poverty. If we're going to redefine unemployment, we have to redefine poverty. Now, there is usually, when we talk poverty, whether it's the Sustainable Development Goals, when we talk poverty and all that, there's too much emphasis on material things, whether you've got a house or a bicycle, or you've got some assets. Okay, but no, I would say poverty exists at 3 levels, and the material level is the lowest. Now, material poverty is relying on things that you do not produce. And then you produce things that you don't rely on. You see, that is the quickest way to poverty. And that is what we have done in Africa. We actually rely on things we don't produce. The bread we eat every day is produced from wheat. We don't produce the wheat. We import it from North America mostly. We rely on something we don't produce. Then the things we can produce, we don't rely on. So we are just eroding our asset base. A more important level of poverty that we are suffering is intellectual poverty. And that's why people get up in the morning and say, I'm unemployed. My mother would have killed me if I told her I'm unemployed. And I get up in the morning, even as a small boy, you get a task to do, you finish the task, and then you go and tell the mother that I'm done, I'm finished. I've finished all the work you have given me. Well, you would get a hiding during my time because you will never finish the work. To say you're unemployed is intellectual poverty. You do not value or leverage your own knowledge. You are trying to leverage somebody else's knowledge about what a job is and where you get the job. You cannot borrow intelligently. You just borrow ideas without co-creating that knowledge and using it locally. That's intellectual poverty. Then there's a deeper level of poverty, which is a spiritual poverty, where you then just completely lose all sense of confidence, identity, culture. You don't know where you've come from, that you are here today because those behind you for generations and centuries were not poor. They were busy. They were never unemployed. That's why you're there. They always produced. They always ensured the lifestyle was high. All you have to do is to take it to the next stage. But when you have spiritual poverty, you start to think, no, it's not for us. It's for other people. You lose self-belief. You lose self-reliance. Now you rely on government for this. You rely on the church for that. You rely on an NGO for that. That is my definition of spiritual poverty. You are done. You can never be assisted. So we have to understand how others have done it so that they are not as unemployed as we are seated there waiting for something to happen. No, societies that have succeeded and created wealth and value for themselves, the number one thing is confidence. It's not technology. It's not money. It's confidence. It's the number one cultural value that leads to creation of wealth. Self-belief, stamina, long distance running, knowing that we can do it. Number two is boldness. All the things that create wealth and jobs and employment is nothing but courage and boldness to do things that others have not been able to do before, and not hesitate to do those things and push them through. In African traditions, savings and investments was a big thing. We were not wasteful. You saved everything. You protected everything. You only kill a cow when it was really the last number. It to be done, and you ate all the meat. And every part of the animal would be used for something or other to manufacture clothes and what have you. Savings and investments. That's why even after colonization, investment was high in us. I mean, I remember when I completed my doctorate, PhD, and calculated how much it would have cost for me to get educated all the way up to PhD level, and the amount of money at that time, when I divided it with the average earnings of a rural African husband and wife, it would take 250 years of their earnings to send me into my educational growth all the way up to PhD. So high levels of investment. So ambition. I talk about ambition because if you cannot see it, if we are not able to, like I'll talk about it in a minute. Development is about people. If they are not able to set high ambitious goals for themselves and let somebody else set the goals for you and you just follow, we're not going to get there. We're not going to create the wealth. We're not going to create the jobs. We have to learn fast, challenge ourselves, and have fun in the process. But we just have to, when I say a degree of callousness and ruthlessness, what I mean is we have to defend our Africanness ruthlessly. We unapologetically, that's what I mean. We have to defend our own ambition of high African society ruthlessly, fearlessly, and if we don't, others are doing it, and they don't care. We are going to go extinct. So we use a simple formula as Africans on wealth creation. We don't use a complicated one that you get at business school and all these entrepreneur, these. It's very simple. There's only two ways to create wealth in our settings. One, you add value to what you have. And then two, you get your assets to work for you. That's it. So like I've said before, the assets start with the land and whatever you have in terms of additional assets that you've built around that. And if we don't add value to the products that we are producing at those homesteads and our land in the communal areas and whatever we have in our cities, if we don't add value, we just produce and sell raw stuff, we can't create wealth. We have to work our assets sweat for us as a starting point. Next slide. So what are the wealth creating strategies that create these jobs and that we should have every young person on the African continent saying, no, there's no unemployment, there's full employment at the stage of development where we are. Here are the strategies that I have learned over the last few decades. Number one, as I said before, you build physical and biological assets, okay? And if I look at most of our rural areas in Africa, it will be building things. I mean, improve the quality of our trees. We plant trees, all manner of trees, indigenous ones, hardwood, softwood, orchard, fruit trees, herbs, all manner of animals. These are the biological assets we need, and improve the quality of those animals from chickens, goats, cattle. We have to look at all manner of biological assets as a starting point. Then, of course, the physical assets are your wells where you get your water, improving our houses. Like I say, it's not the expensiveness of your house, is how solidly it's done, how lovingly it's done, how homely and livable it is. We have to build roads. They don't have to be highways, and we don't have to wait for government at community level to make sure that we can access our schools and our wells and so on. So that's the starting point. Second is what I explained earlier about the domestic market is not the towns and the exports, it's the community. We have failed to realize that we have to circulate our products and services amongst ourselves through networking at the local level. Now, we no longer consider that business, and yet it's the only business that counts at the early stages of development. Everything is family business to start with. So as an individual, you may come out and move, but you start off in the family business and using the extended family as a business model. It has been used by the Chinese, the Indians, the Jews, name it, they've used these models that we are failing to use. And yet we as Africans always had the strongest family system in the world, but we failed to convert the family system into business. I mean, the last time I bought any jewelry for anybody was in New York, and I was buying something for my wife, and as I was buying it, it was a Jew, and he was saying, "Where are you from?" I said, "Where from? I'm from Harare, and I'll be flying into Johannesburg, and going to Harare." And he says, "Oh, when you get to Johannesburg," he had 3, 4 names of other Jewish jewelry makers. He had a couple in Harare. They know where one of them is doing the same business. They look after each other. It's extended family throughout the world for those people. We don't do that. But that local exchange of goods and services is always the starting point. You can't start at the next stage without starting right there at the community level. Number 3 is refuse to be a dog. Because when we spend all these years sending you to these colleges, university, and so on, we're really just training you to be a dog. So I'm using terminology, my favorite late guy from Lesotho who talked about refusing to be a dog, because we are all dogs. If you are employed, you are a dog because you wait for your employer to feed you, pay you. And your employer, when unhappy, will just kick you, and like any dog, you run away screaming, and then before you know it, you are back again because you want to be fed again. So we have to be dogs for a little while, but not for the whole of our lifetimes. So even when our educational system has to train people to say, yes, you can look for jobs, not what about. Life is about creating your own new ideas. Then we need to bequeath life skills to our children. We have stopped doing that as Africans. We are giving them artificial skills now that they get at school and on television and so on. We no longer teach them basic skills at home, how to prepare food, how to harness the energy of animals, how to use them to cultivate, how to preserve food, home improvement techniques, and all those things. We are no longer teaching our children, thinking they're going to learn more important skills at school and over there. But when you look at other societies and other cultures, they never stop teaching those basic skills at home, because that is what makes the person. And then fifthly, you transmute problems and challenges into business opportunities. I can talk about this forever, but this is where I started off with cultural industries and cottage industries. Yeah, next slide, please. So I already talked about family and community food security as the starting point, and how this actually determines our health and the future and the proto-industries, village industries. I already spoke about this. It's just a repeat slide, I think. So just for my slide show now to show you some pictures, because this is where the intellectual poverty and the spiritual poverty. So I say people need to grow so that they chase their own dreams. People have to chase their own dreams and aspirations. We cannot dream for others. So the educational system, the whole preparation of people for the future so that they lead their own lives should not be about jobs and employment. It's about one's dreams and aspirations. Next slide, please. So people need to grow so that they can explore, because exploring and experiencing is what we should do starting at home. And this is where we should be trying out all sorts of possible skills and products and services we can supply from home, build our own things from home. Wait until you've got the degree or you are in the city. So like I said earlier, we just place too much emphasis on material poverty. And this is the disease that's caught us not only in our educational system, in our development programs. It's more important to build roads and buildings before building really seriously smart people who can develop anything. So I think that emphasis should be in developing people, critical thinking skills, because like I said before, problems are just an absence of higher thoughts. It's an absence of critical thinking. It's critical thinking, like this gentleman is holding this, critical thinking makes you free from all kinds of exploitation and oppression, including unemployment. Yeah, because so copy and paste is the biggest problem. Copy and paste, jobs. It's not there, but as you can see there, when you copy and paste, the pasted version doesn't look as beautiful as the original, doesn't it? It doesn't. And the problem with copy and paste is that, well, if you don't have your own keyboard or your own knowledge system, so pasting is the only natural choice to do, you see? Next. But you see, we spend too much time copying the wrong things. Like I say, you send any African engineer to Germany to spend years learning engineering, and they spend more time just copying the table manners instead of just concentrating on the technology, you see. Next slide, please. So that dependency syndrome is what has been built in us by governments, churches, NGOs, donors. Everyone just loves us to be dependent. So that's self-reliance. We have become sophisticated beggars in a continent where begging was really abhorred. As a youngster myself, in my village, in my community, no family, no husband and wife would go and beg for food from other people. They would work so hard to feed their own families. The pride of being self-reliant. And the community would even eject people who were beggars, but today we are specialized beggars. So we really have to, the mindset shift that is needed is massive. Next, please. You could, you are when the technology is broken down or something. And create produce raw materials that we manufacture for the local demand. Don't worry about the towns and the export yet. First, worry about just ensuring that family is well fed, the community's needs are met, because it's
sorry, I think just the network is going crazy because of the rain. Prof, I've unmuted you again.
I'm done. So
okay.
Kevin can take over.
All right.
Is Kevin Law?
No, I've unmuted Kevin.
Hello.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Prof, for floor for questions and contributions. Please use the hand reaction.
Okay, I think Kevin's got a bad network as well. It's time for a question and answer. Our first hand up is Alioni Timothy. Please ask your question.
Thank you very much, Prof. Thank you very much for this presentation a lot. Prof, I want to ask you two things. Number one pertains to the issue of capital. Two pertains to the issue for skills. On the issue of capital, we have a lot of young people like myself. We have but the gap may capital in starting our relationship today, like people there they'll do they'll be self-reliant. So my question is how can you give us advice on how to start in terms? That's my first question. Then the second issue is on skills. We understand that some of us, maybe we have wanted marketing, I studied marketing, I'm very good in that. For me to, is there any chance, maybe we need an advice from you as to whether or not we have sessions where we are going to learn some skills Okay, those are my questions. Thank you very much.
Okay. Leonie Timothy, I think you can put the question in the chat because it was really breaking up badly. We know the weather is really tough right now. Next person to ask is Muson Zamsoni.
Okay. I'm just curious as to how much of our problem is growing out of the language in which we define problems or define situations, and the people who have given us that language as a tool for defining problems and defining situations. We're talking about the fact that when poverty is mentioned, almost all of us automatically equate it to material lack, which I imagine must have been built into us, because when you are lacking something material, materials are acquired through money. Money requires you to go into employment. Employment is something that's provided by the people who gave us language, and the mechanisms for growing, therefore the mechanisms for growing out of that poverty. How much power would we give ourselves or reclaim if we owned the language in which the conversation was happening, and is even possible in a language that is not indigenously, organically ours, that we've acquired and through which we are trying to work our way through the maze? We seem to always then walk into these linguistic traps, which become actual traps because you walk into it. We're talking again about the idea of what the family is. So if we say Muli, and we're talking amongst ourselves, or Imuli, we know what that means. It's not people living in a house, mother, father, son, daughter. It's a much, much bigger construct than when you say family, because then you have to add the word extended to it to make it accommodate what Muri is to us. It seems like a small thing, but when does that not begin to impact how we understand and attack and struggle to overcome the things that are hindering us? Because as we try to overcome them and compete, we are using the tools of those who brought those tools to hobble us to their advantage. I don't know if that makes sense.
Thank you very much, Mr. Misoni. Do we have any other questions for this round? Okay, I think, Prof, for this section, you can answer these two questions, and then we will get another set of hands up. Thank you.
Thanks. I could not figure out Alion's question. You mentioned capital and skills. I picked that up, but I could not get the question. So if you have, if anybody had, if Kevin or Simo, you got the question, you can let me know.
I'm muting him so he can ask it again. I think maybe he's got a better connection now. Mr. Timothy, please proceed.
Thank you very much. Yes, Prof, my question pertains to the issue of capital. As young people, we may have brilliant ideas. Let's say I want to start my own business, and the business requires, let's say, $100, but I don't have like the startup money to do that. So my question is, can you give us some leads as to what should we do to acquire that money, considering that maybe it may be a challenge for us to get some loan from the bank and so forth and so on. Then the second issue is on skills. I want to ask you whether these sessions which we are having these days, so to on. Yes, those are my questions.
All right. Thank you. So Alion, so Alion, the capital. When you say capital, I think you mean cash. I don't think you really mean capital, because capital is not money, it's not cash. Capital is the accumulation of verified knowledge about something that makes it worth something. Okay. Let me repeat that in other words. It's only when something has got a reputation of having certain values repeatedly and the information is available and is easily verifiable that people equate it to wealth. That's capital. Okay. The fact that capital can then leverage cash is what I think you may be struggling with, because what you want is cash. This is what when I hear what you're saying, you're not looking for capital, you're looking for cash. No one is going to give you cash because cash is not worth anything. Cash is nothing. Cash is not a derivative of capital. So what you're missing is capital, which is, if you have a business idea or you have started a business that you want somebody to invest in, what you are lacking is a demonstration of your idea and a demonstration of its value, a demonstration of how this idea of yours improves people's lives and people's lifestyles, and use that to then have a manner of possible interested parties to invest in your business. Okay. So that's what capital means, Timothy. So, but what you are trying to do is to take a shortcut and say, I've got a business idea. Somebody please lend me some money to try out the idea. Well, that doesn't take you very far. That's why you're not getting money from the so-called banks, because the banks are not looking at which are so brilliant and they are so got so much promise on the ground, asking you for when they are going to give you money after that, the skill and an idea bank to give you a loan. That's not capital. It's about how you start ideas on your own steam, your own land, your own labor, your own ideas, your own commitment, your own connections, and do it so well that somebody is willing to part with their money anytime to grow your business. That's capital. And skills, yes, galore. I mean, we are going, when we actually on to translating these ideas into action, so many different skills, it makes sense to do it on the ground, and we are developing very sharp what you might call reusable learning objects that can be used to learn how to apply these skills and develop your own ideas on the ground. Then Musonza, brilliant point. Honestly, you're so right, because it's just amazing how right you are, and we don't know that this is what happened to us, because somebody tells you. They don't only tell you what unemployment is, they also tell you that once we train you in this, that's all you can do. You should not be looking for any other job. They tell you all sorts of things. You are trained to work for them, and just to work for somebody, not to work for yourself. And the same thing on the family. On the family, they did even more damage. African families, I mean, you have traveled well over, I have. There's no family structure anywhere in the world which was as brilliant as the African family system. So the African family system, it was by far the best in terms of social structure and its ability to deal with social and economic issues. But now the colonial system made sure that the African family can still do some good things for the family, but not economically. They discourage us working together. You cannot work with your family members. You cannot support your family members. It's supposed to be nepotism. It's supposed to be this nonsense. And yet that's all they do. When you look at Indian families, Chinese families, you look at American families, European families, Jews, it's all family businesses that grow into bigger businesses, but they tell you you can't do it. then you grow up thinking a business means you're working with foreigners, you don't know who they are, and you're creating something that is sold to people you don't know. So that is the single most important value system we have lost as Africans. We have lost the social capital. Thinking is not important for economic and business capital.
Thank you very much, Prof, for that. We've got 10 minutes to go, so we'll take 3 more questions, and then Prof will respond to the 3, and we'll close off the session and migrate to Zoom and Telegram.
Is there anybody who's going to put their hand up to ask a question? Please use the hand icon so we can see when your hand is up.
Simba's hand is up, and I think I also saw his question in the box. Dr. Simba Sibanda.
Simba Sibanda, all right. There you go, Mr. Sibanda.
Thank you. Yeah, Prof, you probably saw the question I put in the chat box. That's really what I wanted to bring your attention to, because the moderator doesn't seem to be paying attention to that. I thought I wouldn't have to do that to ask you verbally. But what I'm saying here is that developments in Europe, for instance, with COVID and the way people have been moving away from the cities and going into the rural areas, it also gives you an opportunity to social distance as a family without interacting with too many people. It's somewhat negative, but there's some positive sides to it. But when you look at what has happened is, when I grew up, the thing that came into my mind was, let me get educated and get out of this village. You know what I mean? So our education turned out to be very extractive, taking in like what happened to Babno. They just go in and get rid of all the leaders. Some they killed, the young men, brilliant ones, they took with them to work. And so you were literally left with the lame and the old. And that's more or less what's happening to the village. I mean, when you go to the village today, the farmers are over into the village, but it's much more than just investing materially, but I think investing intellectually and making sure that we love those villages to an extent that we want to in our choices. I'll share, and look what happened to Israel when Israel got to re-established as a nation state after the Second World War. We saw all the Jews going back home, and so it's kind of like a similar situation there. Thank you, Prof.
I agree 100%. So there are 2 instances. Like in Kenya, I've seen a wave of young people and others go back to the rural communities because they finally discovered the wealth that's in there. In Zimbabwe, I think there was a time when the economy was so bad that the cities shrunk and people went back to the rural areas and smaller towns. So I think what would accelerate it for Africa today with the youngsters would be that concept of the village economics and the proto-industries, where let me give you an example. All you have to do is walk in the nearest business center in any of the rural communities and see the kind of products that people are importing from the cities and from overseas is all really nonsense products. Trinkets, snack foods, even the textiles and the consumer goods are just low quality stuff. So the question is, how, instead of even waiting for those products, because if they are being sold in the local business center, it means somebody is consuming them. So instead of waiting for them to be imported into our areas, youngsters should be going back and just pick one item at a time. Take the most likely and the one that with a clear market, start producing it locally. Whether it's popcorn or maputi, or it's the snack foods, or it's the way that we prepare doi and other foods, dried foods, everything that is consumed locally is game, because if people are consuming those things locally, it means if you manufacture a product of equal quality or lower quality but lower cost, as long as it is really attractive, that's how you start the industrialization process in the village and in the townships. So the great young minds and others who are leaving the rural areas is because the dual economy has created poverty. It tells people in the rural areas you're getting educated to leave. And by the way, once you get a bit of education and you're still working in the rural area, you are unemployed. So the definition of unemployment is you are in the rural area. The definition of employment is you are in an urban area, even if you don't have a job. You are better off, you are closer to employment than somebody who is actually making a decent living in the communal areas. But leadership has been depleted because in Africa, the social and political systems don't reward community-based leadership. We need to go back to a political system where people who really work in their villages and grow their villages and have a track record of proper development are the ones who should be voted into the district structures. And then those who do brilliant at district level are the ones who are voted at province level. And no one should be voted into national leadership without having gone through those structures and demonstrating that you have a total understanding of your society, from how to grow a village to a district to a province, before you are allowed to run a ministry or anything at national level. If we go back to that type of political system, which is integrated into the social and economic fabric of society, then maybe we'll start seeing a reversal of brains back into the communal areas. A little bit of that is happening in Kenya, where a lot of the county level leadership is now really serious leadership that in future will produce the national presidents by running your county well, showing you can do local development, showing you can create opportunities at local level, should be the basis on which you are voted to the next level. So there's a need to combine in our political system a bit of popular vote with a large dose of meritocracy, something that is based on merit. There's nothing wrong with that in a political system. The Chinese have done it, others have done it. And I think for Africa, there's absolutely no reason why we cannot have both popular election, selection, and especially merit in understanding leadership and development as the basis that one goes up the ladder from village to national level leadership. Thank you.
Okay, we'll take 2 more questions and then we close off the session. There's Musoni and Brian.
Okay. I want to find out how much you might agree, as I think the narrative of people moving from the village to the city is only now reaching actual intent and extent. I believe that, because I don't think you are done as long you are still living are now going out there sending the money, an extension of the impoverishment that we're already experiencing within the boundaries of our geographical sort of territories.
Brian, thank you very much. Brian next.
Yeah, thank you so much, Prof, for such an insightful and thought-provoking presentation that I think will highly challenge the majority of young people across Africa who are sitting down hopelessly waiting to be employed by somebody or by the government. So in the presentation, you spoke about what you call intellectual poverty. I really agree with you that it is really a leading type of poverty that is dragging Africa backwards and downwards. Nonetheless, very few people, I think, appreciate that they are suffering from intellectual poverty more than they are suffering from what you call material poverty. So in your thoughts, Prof, what do you think must be done to equip those young people or people in general with such knowledge that they are suffering from intellectual poverty? And what they need to have first is confidence, boldness, and courage before material things such as cash. That's my first question. And my second question is with regards to what you call prototype industrialization. Can you explain a bit more on that and how that can be done? So how can that stimulate a breakthrough into development we want in Africa? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brian, for that. Prof, over to you.
You unmute me, please. Yeah, okay. So, Sonza, 100%, my friend. When it comes to village to city, it's very simple for me in answering your question. All you have to remember, the one thing you have to remember in answering your question is that as long as our cities in Africa are dormitories, they are not manufacturing cities. They are not growing because of manufacturing. They are growing because they're dormitories that receive products from other countries who have manufactured products. They're just commercial centers and administrative centers to channel goods from all over the world to your rural populations. Then you are not going to stop that trend. It's just a slow process of villagizing the whole of Africa because we are not manufacturing. So we should find a new name. So intellectually here in the head, we ought to be finding a new name for our cities because they're not cities in the true sense of the word that they're existing and growing because of manufacturing. They are actually not cities. They are dormitories and administrative centers. So until that changes, what you're talking about is irreversible. Then Brian, on how can we reverse intellectual poverty? Once again, if I think of one thing that we need to do more, that I'm definitely going to be doing more of in reversing intellectual poverty, is getting people to understand the meaning of life. You see, people really don't take time to examine what is the real meaning of life. Why are we here? And why are we here only for a certain period of time, then we are taken out of here by nature? If we understand that, then we know it's a waste of time, just hanging around there, waiting for somebody to do things for you, waiting for somebody to dream for you, waiting for somebody to figure out how do you create your own things, how do you explore, life is a game. Life is about going out there and exploring for yourself, discovering for yourself, creating new things for yourself, and enjoying it and experiencing in the process. Now, if you don't understand that, then it means you think you're a machine. You think life is, you are just a machine. You are here to do whatever you're told to do. You are here to copy somebody. You are here because somehow you're going to survive forever. It's not going to happen. So that's the starting point, Brian, in understanding that as long as you're at that point, you're intellectually and spiritually so poor, no one can help you. Once you realize you have to dream for yourself, you have to aspire for yourself, you actually have to create new things in your lifetime before you are out of here, because you're going to be out. If you don't understand that, then you are stuck with looking for a job and looking for answers from other people and not yourself. So I think that that's the key thing. And then on proto-industrialization is the single most important aspect for young people. So proto-industrialization is a way of saying you manufacture goods without factories. You don't wait for a factory. You don't wait for somebody to tell you, go to town, rent a factory, then you can start producing snack foods, then you can start doing dried fruits that are exported to Europe. No, you can do it in the village and in the township without factories, even without machines. Okay, I've seen it. I'm doing it myself, preparing top quality teas, herbal teas, packaged, top quality packaging. No machine, not a single machine, just a small little machine to grind some of the tea. You can produce top quality products without factories. You can produce locally relevant products for foods and so on without factories. That's proto-industrialization. If we don't promote that and take the equivalent of CSO, it has to be a proper government supported ideas in every part of the country. People must manufacture goods and services. You will see in no time, like the Chinese did it between 1980 and 1990, that people start consuming noodles. When you consume noodles in a small packet here, 50 cents, very cheap, it started as a village product. It wasn't being produced in Beijing. You can go for many other similar products, including toothpicks that you import from China and stuff. It's all proto-industrialization to start with. Manufacture without factories. You take local materials, convert them into valuable, value-added products that are consumed locally and eventually in your cities, and eventually you export them. I hope that answers that question, Brian. Thank you so much for your questions, and I appreciate the time you spend with us today. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your responses, and thank you very much for a wonderful presentation. Thank you all for your time and contributions. Appreciate the time you guys taking to come on board with us. Now we're migrating the conversation to our WhatsApp and Telegram groups, where Prof will share his final thoughts for the session. Big shout out to the DWP technical team for putting this session together. Please like our Facebook page, Dialogue with Prof Mandi, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Dialogue with Prof Mandi Rukuni, and follow us on Twitter, Dialogue with Prof. Thank you very much once again, and enjoy the rest of your evening. Good night.